December 29th, 1944, 11:40 p.m. Over the pitch-black skies north of the Philippine Islands, Major Carroll C. Smith crouched in the cramped cockpit of his P-61 Black Widow. The hum of twin Pratt & Whitney engines filled the cabin. Petz's attention was fixed on the glowing radar screen in front of him. A blip moved at 180 knots. Japanese bombers, 12 of them, seen toward American airfields. Smith had flown 43 combat missions, claimed 4 kills, and now faced the most critical night of his career. Each bomber that got through meant dead engineers, destroyed airfields, and thousands of American lives at risk. He knew the stakes. Before we dive in, hit the subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from today. Radar operator, Lieutenant Philip Porter called out vectors, guiding Smith toward the first target. Darkness enveloped everything. Clouds obscured the stars and moon. The Japanese believed the night shielded them. They were wrong. Smith's P-61 was built for this moment. Its SCR-720 radar could detect aircraft miles away, turning night into day. He had one shot at perfection. One opportunity to prevent disaster. Every decision, every maneuver, every trigger squeeze counted. One aircraft could be destroyed by brute force. 12 required precision, skill, and a silent partnership between pilot and radar operator. This wasn't just a night mission. This was a war of shadows, of unseen battles fought in the void above the Philippines. And Major Carroll Smith was about to rewrite the rules of aerial combat. Major Carroll C. Smith wasn't just any pilot. At 26, he had already flown 43 combat missions in the Pacific Theater, claiming 4 confirmed kills. But tonight, the stakes were unlike anything he'd faced before. The Japanese had been hammering Moro airfields relentlessly for 2 weeks, 334 air raid alerts in 14 days. These airfields weren't just targets, they were lifelines. If American engineers couldn't finish construction, the Lingayan Gulf invasion would be delayed, and thousands of soldiers' lives would hang in the balance. Smith's aircraft? The P-61 Black Widow was unlike anything the Japanese had encountered. Twin Pratt & Whitney are 2,800 engines, a 66-foot wingspan for 20mm cannons, and a radar system that could detect enemy planes miles away in complete darkness. The Japanese thought night made them invisible. They were wrong. Smith's radar operator, Lieutenant Philip Porter, had 6 months of experience reading the glowing screen, tracking contacts, and guiding Smith toward their prey. Together, they were an invisible huntress in her eyes. But the mathematics of this night were brutal. 1 P-61 against 12 Japanese bombers. Caging 1 meant leaving 11 to continue their deadly mission. Every moment wasted could cost lives. Every miscalculation could allow bombs to fall on sleeping soldiers and essential airfield infrastructure. Smith's fuel was finite, his ammunition limited, and the night sky vast and merciless. This was more than a mission. Was a test of skill, endurance, and courage. 1 man, 1 radar operator, and 1 aircraft stood between disaster and victory. And in less than an hour, Major Carroll C. Smith would prove that, sometimes, the impossible could be achieved. 23:42 hours. The first 4 Japanese bombers appeared on Porter's radar. Smith had to make a choice, who to engage first, and whether. His plan to intercept all 4 in a single night was brilliance or madness. His hands gripped the controls. The twinner 2,800 engines roared as the Black Widow climbed toward the first contact. Clouds swallowed the moonlight. Darkness was absolute. The Japanese believed they were invisible. They were wrong. What do you think about this moment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Porter called out vectors. Heading 035, altitude 8,000 feet, range 4 miles. Smith's eyes darted between his instruments and the radar scope. He couldn't see the bomber visually. He relied entirely on the blip pulsing on the screen. Slowly, methodically, he closed the distance at 1,000 yards. The first Mitsubishi G4M Betty came into view. Orange glows flickered from its exhaust, but the crew had no idea the Black Widow was on their tail. Smith positioned the P-61 slightly below and behind, aligning the target in his N6 gun sight. The the four 20mm cannons fired. In a deafening volley, the Betty's right wing exploded. Fire consumed the fuselage. The bomber rolled, plunged toward the ocean, and vanished from sight. 1 down, 11 remained. Smith didn't hesitate. The second Betty was 23 miles away, cruising at 6,000 feet. Geometry and fuel calculations raced through his mind. He had minutes before the bomber reached Moreau's airfields. The P-61 surged forward, engines screaming, every second critical. At 500 yards, he fired again. The right and left engines ignited. The bomber became another fireball in the night sky. 2 down, 10 to go. The third contact was different. A Nakajima Ki-49 Helen. Faster, more maneuverable, evasive. Smith approached. From below and to the left, exploiting the blind spot. The tail gunner's tracers cut dangerously close, but Porter's guidance kept him on track. A concentrated 3-second burst tore through the fuselage. Flames consumed the bomber as it spiraled. Into the ocean. 3 down, 9 remaining, fuel 28%. Finally, the fourth bomber, the low-flying Betty, closing in on Morrow, loomed in the radar. Anti-aircraft searchlights swept the sky, gunners ready, tension unbearable. Smith dove from above, gaining altitude advantage. Range 350 yards. Final burst, another fireball. 4 bombers destroyed in just 55 minutes. The Japanese couldn't comprehend it. 1 aircraft, 1 pilot, and his radar operator had decimated half of the incoming bombers. The P-61 Black Widow had proven its night fighting supremacy, but Smith's night was far from over. Fuel dwindled, danger remained, and the mission demanded perfection all the way home. The night was far from over, with 4 bombers destroyed. Major Carroll Smith faced his final challenge, returning to Morrow with dwindling fuel while staying alert for any remaining Japanese threats. At 00 for 2 hours, Porter detected a new contact, range 4 miles, altitude 7,000 feet. Smith calculated instantly, engage or risk letting the enemy reach the airfields. Every second mattered. His fuel at 19%, risk high, but letting 1 bomber slip through could undo everything. The P-61 accelerated engines, screaming as Smith closed on the target. It wasn't a bomber, it was a Nakajima KT for Frank. A single-engine fighter faster and more agile than his Black Widow. Daylight or darkness, unskilled, and it could outfight him. But this was night. The Frank had no radar, no visual advantage. Smith's element of surprise was absolute. He maneuvered below and behind, range closing to 500 yards. Every instrument, every gauge, every pulse of radar was critical. A single miscalculation could mean fuel exhaustion, a miss, or death. Smith squeezed the trigger. The 20mm shells ripped through the Frank's tail and engine. Its flames engulfed the fighter. The pilot ejected, parachute blooming against the black sky. The Frank plummeted into the ocean, destroyed. 5 kills, 5 aircraft in 63 minutes of relentless combat. The Black Widow was now a ghost in the night sky. A single vessel of American ingenuity, courage, and lethal precision. Smith calculated fuel remaining 15%. Enough to reach Morrow? Barely. Anti-aircraft crews were waiting, but the darkness was now his ally. Had to land without visual references, relying solely on radar altimeter and dead-reckoning navigation. Every movement precise, every decision a matter of life and death. At 0059, wheels touched crushed coral. The landing was hard but intact. Fuel at 6%, just enough for contingency. Ground crews illuminated the aircraft with flashlights, guiding him safely. Smith climbed out, hands trembling from exhaustion, not fear. Porter followed, the unsung hero of the mission, whose skill had made every kill possible. Together, they had rewritten the rules of night combat in the Pacific. Intelligence officers confirmed. It's 4 bombers, 1 fighter, all destroyed, all exactly where Smith reported. The airfields were safe, the Lingayan Gulf invasion schedule intact. American soldiers, engineers, and future P-51s and P-47s owed their lives to one pilot, one radar operator, and a machine built to dominate the night. The Japanese couldn't believe what had just happened. One P-61 had hunted them, destroyed their bombers, and returned unscathed. A legend was born, not in daylight glory, but in the shadows of the night sky. The night sky over Morro had never been so silent. The last fires of the destroyed bombers had faded, leaving only darkness and the hum of the P-61's engines as Smith returned to base. But silence in war is deceptive. Every radar sweep, every distant flash of anti-aircraft fire could signal new threats. Smith and Porter knew the Japanese were relentless. They would not give up so easily, even as the adrenaline of the first 4 kills and the final fighter engagement ebbed. Smith's mind raced. Each bomber had represented not just metal and engines, but lives. Engineers building the airfields, soldiers resting in tents, supply lines vital to the Lingayan Gulf invasion. If even one had slipped through, destruction and delay would follow. Victory was measured in lives saved, not statistics. The Black Widow had proven unstoppable, a machine born of innovation and American ingenuity. Its radar allowed Smith and Porter to see the invisible, to strike fear into pilots who had once believed the night was their ally. And yet, for all its power, it was still just a tool. Smith's skill, training, and instinct were what turned technology into triumph. Hours later, in debriefing, Smith recounted every detail from memory: altitudes, headings, ranges, maneuvers. Porter confirmed every radar vector, every correction. Together, they had executed a flawless night of combat. The Japanese had underestimated the P-61, underestimating the Americans' ability to fight where darkness should have protected them. The squadron commander's voice broke the quiet of the briefing room. "Major Smith, Lieutenant Porter, you've not just defended the airfields. You've shown the Japanese what happens when they think they can hide in the night. This will be remembered." Smith remained humble. Heroes rarely do the work for recognition. They do it for duty, for comrades, for the countless lives that depend on their courage. And on this night, Major Carroll C. Smith and Lieutenant Philip Porter had done exactly that. The Japanese, far to the north, were scrambling to understand how 4 bombers had disappeared in less than 80 minutes. Their reports would be filled with disbelief, confusion, and fear. One American night fighter had shattered their assumptions, proven that technology, skill, and courage combined could turn the tide of battle in hours. Not days. By dawn, the scale of Smith's night mission became clear. For Japanese bombers, and 1 fighter destroyed, 0 American casualties. The engineers on Murrow's airfields had slept peacefully through the night, unaware that a single P-61 had safeguarded their work. The Lingayan Gulf invasion schedule remained intact. Without Smith and Porter, construction would have been delayed. American troops would have faced heavier losses, and the momentum of the Pacific campaign could have stalled. The P-61 Black Widow had demonstrated its unmatched night-fighting capability, but technology alone does not win battles. Skill, intuition, and teamwork do. Smith's precision flying, combined with Porter's exceptional radar operation, allowed them to defy the odds. Together, they exemplified the lethal efficiency of the 418th Night Fighter Squadron. Their efforts became a blueprint for night operations in the Pacific Theater, showing commanders that a single aircraft could protect entire airfields and save thousands of lives. The intelligence reports arrived, confirming every claim. Wreckage sighted, bodies recovered, bombers accounted for. Murrow's defenses had held. The invasion forces received uninterrupted support, and the American war effort pressed forward without delay. Every life saved that night was a testament to planning, courage, and innovation. Word of the mission spread quietly among the pilots. Smith was already legendary within the squadron, but what mattered most to him wasn't fame, it was knowing that those under his protection could work and rest without fear. Porter, often invisible to outsiders, had proven that radar could be more deadly than any machine gun. that teamwork between pilot and operator was the ultimate weapon. Even the Japanese, in their reports, acknowledged the impossible. One P-61, hunting in complete darkness, had shattered their formation, destroyed bombers faster than they could react, and vanished without trace. For every soldier, pilot, and crew member on both sides, the night had become a battlefield of mind and machine. A clash where American ingenuity had outmatched traditional tactics. The impact went beyond the immediate kills. The confidence it gave to the men on the ground. The lessons learned for future night missions. The strategic advantage in the Pacific theater made this one night pivotal. Smith and Porter didn't just fight aircraft. They defended lives, schedules, and the future of the campaign. They proved that night no longer belonged to the enemy. By the time Smith landed, the mission was over, but the consequences would echo through history. The Lingayan Gulf invasion would succeed on schedule. Thousands of soldiers would fight under air cover, and American dominance in night combat was solidified. It's a single P-61 that changed the course of a campaign. The night of December 29, 1944. It's not yet fully behind them. Despite 5 confirmed kills, Major Carroll Smith knew that danger never truly sleeps in war. Reports of Japanese reconnaissance flights and isolated enemy aircraft were still coming in. It's 14:30 hours. Smith and Porter prepared the P-61 for a second. Mission, refueled, and rearmed. The same precision and focus they had relied on earlier. At 15:12, Porter's radar locked onto a new contact, a Nakajima Katie for Frank fighter. Altitude 12,000 feet, range 8 miles. Smith's heart remained steady. He had altitude advantage and the element of surprise. Frank was one of Japan's most lethal single-engine fighters, faster and more maneuverable than the Black Widow in daylight combat. But this was night, and the Frank had no radar. Darkness was now Smith's weapon. The P-61 dove from above, gravity accelerating them to 390 miles per hour. The Frank pilot could not anticipate the sudden strike. Smith's hand tightened on the controls. Every gauge, every instrument, every radar pulse. Feeding him information in real time, he closed the range, 400 yards, 350, 300. His finger pressed the trigger. The 20mm cannons unleashed a concentrated burst, shells tearing through the fighter's engine and fuselage. Fire engulfed the aircraft instantly. The Frank rolled inverted and dove into the ocean. Smith and Porter had achieved their 7th kill in less than 24 hours of combat, solidifying Smith as the top-scoring American night fighter ace of world. War II. The mission demonstrated more than just skill. It showcased American innovation, courage, and the lethal advantage of combining radar with superior flying. The Black Widow had become a legend in enemy reports. Japanese pilots could not believe that one aircraft could strike with such precision, eliminate multiple bombers, and escape unscathed. Smith's second mission reinforced the psychological impact. American air superiority at night was absolute. The Pacific theater would never again allow the enemy to operate freely under cover of darkness. As Smith and Porter returned to base, their P-61 engines humming steadily, the strategic significance of their actions was undeniable. The Lingayan Gulf invasion forces would land with full air cover. Airfields were intact, construction uninterrupted, and American dominance in the region ensured. One pilot, one radar operator, and a revolutionary aircraft had changed the course of history in a single night. The Japanese would remember this night as a nightmare. The Americans quietly celebrated a flawless combination of skill, technology, and courage. Smith and Porter had proven that a single P-61 could tip the scales, save lives, safeguard the future of a campaign critical to victory in the Pacific. As Smith taxied the P-61 back to Morro, the enormity of the night's events weighed on him and Porter. Every maneuver, every kill, every decision had been calculated to the second, yet even the best calculations could have failed. One misjudgment, one burst of Japanese gunfire, one engine stall, any could have ended the night in disaster. But it hadn't. The enemy, thousands of miles away, was scrambling to understand how a single P-61 had shattered their carefully planned attacks. Japanese commanders were left with reports filled with confusion and disbelief. For bombers and a fighter eliminated, without warning, without the P-61 ever being spotted until it struck. One aircraft had made an entire formation obsolete for Smith and Porter. The significance was deeper than the numbers. Each bomber destroyed represented engineers, construction crews, and soldiers spared from death. Each fighter downed was a message. The Americans controlled the night sky. Moreau's airfields, critical to the Lingayan Gulf invasion, were untouched. The operation would continue without delay. Thousands of lives were preserved because two men had pushed their skills, their courage, and their trust in technology too. The limit the squadron celebrated quietly. The Black Widow had performed flawlessly, proving its design superiority. Its radar allowed them to see what others could not, strike when the enemy least expected it, and execute precision attacks impossible with conventional aircraft. Yet the true weapon was the combination of Smith's instinctive piloting and Porter's radar mastery. One without the other could not have achieved such results. The psychological impact on the American forces on the ground was immeasurable. Soldiers and engineers, unaware of the drama overhead, continued their work without fear. Every successful intercept meant confidence, morale, and momentum. The enemy knew the Americans could dominate even when darkness should have been their ally. That night became an emblem of American ingenuity, bravery, and technological superiority. In the Pacific Theater, Porter finally exhaled, his eyes scanning the radar for the last time. "No contacts remaining," he said. Smith nodded, exhausted but alert. The mission had been a triumph of coordination and skill. A T-Street would record the skills, but only they truly understood the precision, pressure, and peril involved in each intercept. As the sun rose, painting the horizon with faint pink and gold, Morrow was silent, except for the distant sounds of construction and the quiet rumble of P-61 engines. The Japanese threat had been neutralized, their plans thwarted. Smith and Porter had proven that one aircraft, one crew, and the relentless pursuit of duty could change the tide of war in a single night. The full significance of that night only became clear in the days that followed. Reports from Morrow confirmed what Smith and Porter had achieved: 4 bombers and a single fighter eliminated, all before the enemy could strike a single target. Construction crews and American troops were safe. The Lingayan Gulf invasion schedule remained on track, and morale soared across the Pacific Theater. Smith's 7 confirmed kills in less than 24 hours elevated him to legendary status among American night fighter pilots. But for Smith and Porter, the recognition was secondary to the mission's success. Their coordination had saved lives, preserved critical infrastructure, and demonstrated the power of the P-61 Black Widow. Radar, teamwork, and precision flying had turned what seemed like an impossible mission into a decisive victory. The Japanese were forced to reassess their strategy. They had underestimated the P-61, its radar capabilities, and the skill of its crew. Reports circulated among their ranks describing the terrifying effectiveness of a single night fighter, capable of striking at will and disappearing into darkness. Fear replaced confidence, and their future night operations over the Philippines became hesitant and cautious. The Americans had seized control of the night sky back at Morrow. The 418th Night Fighter Squadron took pride in their achievement. But it was Smith and Porter who embodied the mission's triumph. Every instrument reading, every calculation, every maneuver had to be flawless. There was no margin for error. Two had proven that a single aircraft, in the hands of the right crew, could protect an entire airfield and shape the outcome of a campaign. The strategic impact rippled beyond Morrow. The Lingayan Gulf invasion, one of the most critical operations in the Pacific, proceeded without delays or unexpected casualties from air attacks. American forces gained air superiority in the region, a crucial advantage that allowed the subsequent stages of the campaign to unfold smoothly. Every life saved that night reinforced the importance of night fighters in modern warfare and cemented the Black Widow's role in history. Smith's 7 kills were not just numbers. They were lives preserved and missions secured. Porter's radar expertise became a model for future crews. The success of that night redefined American tactics, demonstrating that technology, courage, and teamwork could overcome even the most audacious enemy plans. It was a night that would be remembered in the squadron's records and intelligence reports. In the history of the Pacific Theater, the world would never know the full story. Smith returned to the United States. Porter received recognition for his skill. The P-61 continued to dominate night operations, yet for the men who had faced death in darkness, every calculation, every maneuver, every burst of cannon fire had mattered. Together, they had turned a near-impossible mission into a historic victory. The aftermath of December 29th, 1944. It's a quiet victory for the men of the 418th Night Fighter Squadron. Major Carroll Smith and Lieutenant Philip Porter had returned from one of the most extraordinary missions in American night fighting history. Their P-61 Black Widow, flawless and deadly, had demonstrated the unmatched skill of American airmen and the ingenuity of their technology. Intelligence officers meticulously documented every kill, every maneuver, every altitude and heading, ground. Observers confirmed the wreckage of 4 bombers and a fighter, scattered across the waters north of Morro. The Japanese command, stunned and confused, scrambled to revise their tactics, but the night had already changed the rules of engagement. One P-61 could now strike terror into entire formations. Fear replaced strategy. Hesitation replaced aggression. And the Americans had seized the psychological advantage for the American troops on the ground. The victory was unseen but deeply felt. Airfields remained intact. Construction crews continued their work, and the Lingayan Gulf invasion schedule stayed on track. Every soldier who slept that night owed their safety to the coordination, skill, and courage of 2 men and 1 extraordinary aircraft. Smith's 7 confirmed kills, including the 4 bombers and the Frankfurter in less than 24 hours, were more than a personal achievement. They were a decisive contribution to the war effort. Porter's precision on the radar scope became legendary within the squadron. Without his guidance, Smith could not have located, intercepted, and eliminated multiple targets in complete darkness. Their teamwork embodied the future of night fighting, technology and human skill working in perfect harmony. The Black Widow had proved its worth, not just as a machine of war, but as a symbol of American innovation, resilience, and dominance. In aerial combat, historians later noted that the actions of Smith and Porter at Morro exemplified the turning tide of the Pacific Theater. Night fighting, once considered secondary to daylight operations, became a vital strategic tool. The psychological impact on Japanese pilots was profound, and the American forces gained an enduring edge in aerial supremacy. The memory of that night would echo through military archives, intelligence reports, and squadron histories. Smith returned to civilian life after the war, modest and unassuming, never seeking recognition. Porter received the Distinguished Flying Cross, a testament to the skill and bravery required for that extraordinary mission. The Black Widow continued to fly in combat, but the legend of that night, 4 bombers gone in 80 minutes, would never fade. The P-61 Black Widow, silent and deadly, had secured the skies over Morro. The mission proved that technology, courage, and flawless teamwork could turn the tide of battle. Major Carroll Smith and Lieutenant Philip Porter became unsung heroes, their actions saving countless lives and ensuring the success of critical operations in the Pacific. The Lingayan Gulf invasion went on as planned. Airfields built under constant threat were now operational, providing air cover and logistical support. Thousands of American lives were preserved that night because 1 pilot, 1 radar operator, 1 advanced aircraft refused to fail. History would remember the numbers. 7 kills in less than 24 hours, a record unmatched by any American night fighter pilot. But it also remembered the principle: American skill, courage, and innovation could overcome even the most dangerous odds. The Japanese had learned a painful lesson that December night. 1 P-61 could change everything. Before we close, a quick call out to our community. If you want to uncover more unbelievable World War II stories, hit the subscribe button because you won't believe what's coming next. Tell me where you're watching from today. United States, United Kingdom, Canada, or elsewhere. Major Carol Smith returned home humble and uncelebrated, while the P-61 Black Widow became a symbol of American ingenuity in the skies. The men of the 418th Night Fighter Squadron continued their missions, but that night over Morro would forever stand as proof that bravery, precision, and technology could rewrite history.